Hey guys, tonight we begin in a haze, a thick, sweet cloud of burning petals and sacred resin curling through the air of a moonlit temple. You're barefoot, moving slowly across the cool stone floor, and everything smells like cinnamon blue lotus and something you can't quite place, but it's making your legs feel lighter and your thoughts a little fuzzy. A dozen oil lamps flicker in the gloom. Their glow dances across painted walls where gods wear animal heads and wink at you, possibly for real. At the center of the chamber, a priest chants something in ancient Egyptian, voice low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat slowing down. He tips powdered lotus into a cup of warm wine. You drink, and that's when things get interesting. Your vision blurs slightly. The floor shimmers like water. You're not panicking, though, because everyone around you seems just as dazed, and that's the point. You're not here to pray. You're here to connect, to the divine, to the ancestors, maybe even to your own disassembled consciousness. Welcome to a sacred trip, Egyptian style. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You probably won't survive ancient Egypt, to be honest. Between sandstorms, crocodiles, and deeply judgmental gods, your odds aren't great. But tonight, your biggest threat is laughing too hard while high in a holy space. Because here's the thing. The Egyptians didn't just build pyramids, they also explored consciousness with the same meticulous care. Their temples were basically laboratories for spiritual chemistry. Historians still argue whether the use of psychoactives was recreational, ritualistic, or just a misunderstood herbal remedy. But you're feeling the effects right now. That warm blue lotus wine you sipped, it isn't just for flavor. Inthea caerulea, the blue lotus flower, is mild but dreamy. Ancient art shows it being sniffed, sipped, and worn behind the ears at parties and ceremonies alike. Think of it like an ancient hybrid of wine and weed, without the paranoia. Priests used it to open the inner eye. Or maybe they just really liked how it made boring hymns more psychedelic. The line between mysticism and mind-altering substances is delightfully blurry here. Even the Book of the Dead, Egypt's spiritual cheat code for the afterlife, reads like a trip report at times. Talking beetles, floating hearts, giant scales of justice, and a crocodile hippo lion demon who eats your soul if you fail the vibe check. You wander deeper into the temple. The incense gets thicker. That's not just perfume in the air. It's a cocktail of resins and crushed herbs, most notably myrrh, frankincense, and kaifi. Oh, kaifi. It's the Egyptian version of a spiritual diffuser bomb. A sacred incense blend used in temples, healing rituals, and bedtime ceremonies. Kaifi contained ingredients like raisins, wine, cinnamon, honey, and who knows what else. Recipes varied, and some might have had mild psychoactive properties, especially when burned in high doses in closed rooms like this. A mainstream historical fact. Records from Edfu Temple detail kaifi as both medicine and offering, meant to delight the gods and soothe the soul. A fringe twist? Some fringe researchers believe its nighttime use promoted vivid dreams, and possibly even lucid ones. If you've ever sleep-paralyzed yourself into meeting a god with a falcon head, you know what I mean. And yet, you're surprisingly calm. Your fingers trail along hieroglyphs etched into the wall, symbols of balance, protection, and eternity. The room is spinning gently now, but in a nice way. You feel like you're part of a pattern older than the stars. You glance to your left. A priestess is pressing something into the mouth of a mummy, maybe natron, maybe ground mandrake root. Both were used in embalming. Both have interesting side effects when ingested. Let's hope you're not next. Back near the altar, a statue of Hathor, goddess of love, music, and euphoric states, smiles eternally. Worshippers would drink, dance, and enter trance-like states in her honor. You can almost hear the rhythm of ancient sistrums jangling just beyond the stone walls. Or maybe that's just your ears ringing. Historians still argue whether the altered states sought in these temples were truly divine connections or carefully staged social rituals. After all, every civilization had its party gods and party tricks. But here, the line between science and magic, drug and devotion, it barely exists. The temple isn't just sacred, it's pharmacological. You lean against a column, breathing slowly, watching shadowy figures move in slow motion. You realize now, this whole temple is alive, breathing, pulsing, watching you back. A joke, somewhere in the afterlife, a priest is whispering, "Dude, that Lotus hit too hard." And yet, none of this is taboo. There's no shame here, no war on drugs, no DARE lectures. The altered state is celebrated, controlled, and carefully wrapped in symbols. You're not a sinner, you're a traveler, a pilgrim of the pineal gland. You close your eyes. Behind them, gold boats drift across a black river. A jackal-headed guide gestures you forward. You are welcome here. Just, maybe don't fall asleep on the altar. You open your eyes, but it's hard to say if you ever really close them. The temple feels both the same and entirely different now. The air carries a deeper hum, like something beneath the stone is purring. You walk, no, glide, into another chamber, past flickering torches and walls that ripple like silk. This is where the high priests gather. And yes, the emphasis is correct. These aren't just your everyday robe-wearing officials with incense holders. These are men and women trained to manipulate perception, to channel gods, and, possibly, to get outrageously, ceremonially baked in the name of enlightenment. You crouch beside a shadowed wall, unnoticed, invisible. In the center of the room, a priest kneels before a small, bubbling bowl. The concoction inside is thick, black, and steaming. He breathes it in deeply. Once, twice. His back arches, and then silence. Except for a low murmur rising from his throat, almost mechanical, like a modem trying to download the divine. You're witnessing something called the opening of the mouth ceremony, traditionally used on statues or mummies to restore their senses. But this version seems personalized, internal. He's not opening someone else's mouth. He's opening his own mind. A mainstream historical fact. High priests, particularly in the House of Life, per Ankh, were highly educated and often led rituals requiring exact incantations, astronomical alignments, and the use of specific aromatic compounds. They weren't winging it. This wasn't some backyard smoke circle. But here's where things get wild. Some lesser-known rituals included the ingestion of psychoactive substances, possibly including henbane, mandrake, or even small doses of datura. These plants could cause hallucinations, intense euphoria, or, well, complete confusion. Datura, for instance, has a reputation. In low doses, it might invoke visions. In higher doses, it might convince you that you are a god, while simultaneously forgetting how socks work. Historians still argue whether these substances were meant to induce real spiritual contact, or if they were tools for theatrical ritual. Were the gods actually speaking through the priest, or was the priest speaking as the god, riding a hallucination into performance? Let's be honest, from the outside, it looked impressive. You, as a temple-goer, would have no clue your local priest just consumed something that made him think the wall was melting. You'd only hear him recite divine messages with authority and grace. You'd probably go home and tell your kids, "Today, Thoth himself spoke to me through a man who smelled like pickled raisins and eye makeup." The priest in front of you starts to sway. Other figures surround him, chanting low, rhythmic syllables that vibrate in your chest like a second heartbeat. He raises a finger and draws symbols into the air, letters of an alphabet no longer spoken. You watch them shimmer and vanish like smoke rings. A joke floats into your head. You know you're in deep when the hieroglyphs start talking back. But it's not funny. It's beautiful. Sacred, even. There's something intensely human about the way ancient Egyptians pursued altered states, not as escapism, but as structured, communal experiences. These weren't solo trips in dark bedrooms. They were orchestrated journeys, with guides, scripts, and exit strategies. You wonder about the initiates, the young ones. Did they have trial runs? Was there a designated trip sitter with a fan made of ostrich feathers and a calming playlist of harp music? Or was it more like, drink this, kneel here, try not to merge with the floor, another fringe tidbit? Some scholars suggest the famed Bennu bird, a symbol of rebirth and inspiration. Think of it as Egypt's phoenix, may represent psychedelic rebirth, an inner death and return experienced during ritual visions. Could be poetic metaphor, or it could be a giant, glittering bird you hallucinate mid-ceremony while lying face down in crushed papyrus. The room shifts again. Now you're following another priest, this one with gold-painted arms and a shaved head. He leads a procession into a smaller chamber where something is being prepared. You peek inside and find a collection of vials, bowls, herbs, and, oddly enough, honey cakes. Yes, cakes. You didn't think you'd get the munchies in ancient Egypt, but here you are. These cakes weren't just snacks. Some were infused with herbs like poppy extract or blue lotus, and used in sacred ceremonies. Others were funeral cakes, eaten to channel the spirit of the dead, or to take on a piece of their memory. In a way, it's like a cross between communion and psychedelic therapy. Take a bite, feel your grandma's soul say hi. A mainstream fact again. Poppies were grown in Egypt and known for their pain-relieving properties. They appear in medical texts like the Ebers Papyrus, but how far their use went into ritual or recreational territory? That's still up for debate. You know, classic historian move, say, possibly, a lot, and never get sued. You duck out of the cake chamber, just in time to avoid being asked to hold a sacred platypus, or is that just your brain glitching again? The temple's closing in now, not in a scary way, more like a weighted blanket made of sandstone and divine wisdom. You feel calm, humbled, slightly hungry again. The last priest you see is lying on his back, eyes closed, smiling faintly. He's holding a carved ankh and murmuring what sounds like a joke between him and Ra himself. You realize something. This isn't about being high, not in the modern sense. It's about being closer, to the gods, to truth, to the fabric of reality. So yeah, maybe you wouldn't survive ancient Egypt. But if you did, you'd come out with stories. Maybe a tattoo of Osiris on your ankle and a new appreciation for hallucinating responsibly under supervision. You step back into the corridor, and now the temple air smells different, smokier, sharper. There's a subtle, spicy tinge to it. Someone just cracked open the really strong stuff. As you round a corner, the atmosphere thickens again, not from incense this time, but from something earthier, more ancient. The smell reminds you of, well, weed, like unmistakably. And that's when you remember, the kingdom of Kush. No, not Kush, like your modern-day dispensary menu. Though yeah, actually, kind of exactly that. The kingdom of Kush, Egypt's southern neighbor in Nubia, was a cultural powerhouse, and some researchers believe they were trading not just gold and ivory, but also cannabis. You follow the scent toward a quiet garden courtyard. Statues of lions watch from the edges, half in shadow. And there, reclining under a date palm, two men in linen robes are lighting something in a shallow stone dish. They pass the smoke between them slowly, ceremonially. You stay quiet, watching. A mainstream fact. Hemp seeds have been found in Egyptian archaeological sites, and while definitive proof of cannabis use remains debated, there are records, like from the papyrus Ramesseum III, that describe herbal mixtures rubbed into the skin or inhaled, which scholars believe may refer to cannabis-based salves. You kneel beside the pool in the center of the courtyard. The water reflects the stars, perfectly still. One of the men speaks softly, something about the gods above and the green gift. That gift could mean many things. Some say cannabis was used for glaucoma, pain, and even hemorrhoids. But others, less mainstream scholars, say it was used to see the gods. Historians still argue whether cannabis was ever openly smoked in Egypt, or if it was solely a medicinal salve or oil. There's no papyrus that reads "light up and vibe." But let's be real. This is a culture that built psychedelic dream chambers into their temples. They weren't exactly opposed to altered consciousness. And here's a fringe gem. Ancient Nubians, closely tied with Egypt through both war and marriage, had tombs containing traces of tetrahydrocannabinol, tea. If that's not a suspiciously mellow grave good, I don't know what is. You dip your fingers into the pool, and ripples spread outward. The water smells faintly of cardamom. Everything smells like something. It's not your imagination. Egyptians weaponized scent. They infused meaning into smell. They layered their lives with fragrance like modern people layer Spotify playlists. Back under the palm tree, a woman approaches the reclining pair and joins the ritual. She anoints her wrists with a dark green oil and inhales deeply. Her eyes close. You watch her breathing slow as she folds her legs and begins to hum softly, low, vibrating notes that seem to come from the center of the earth. It's hypnotic. A joke crosses your mind. Somewhere out there, an ancient stoner is whispering, "Pass the kaifi, bro." But this isn't just recreation. This is connection. The courtyard isn't a party, it's a sacred vibe session. You get the sense that the trio is entering something, not escaping. They're syncing their minds to a deeper rhythm, a kind of cosmic frequency dialed in with smoke and silence. You inch forward and see a tray beside them. On it, cannabis seeds, honey, dried lotus petals, and a small, tightly rolled bundle of something that smells vaguely like clove and magic. Was this the Egyptian version of a pre-roll? Possibly. Or maybe it was just a spice bundle meant for prayer. You really can't tell. That's half the magic, a mainstream fact you might enjoy. While we have few explicit Egyptian references to cannabis, other ancient cultures nearby, like the Scythians and Assyrians, did openly use it in ritual smoke tents. Egypt traded with both. So even if the evidence is thin, the influence was there, wafting in through trade routes and desert winds. The man with the dish passes it to the woman. She bows over it, inhales deeply, and begins to speak, not to the others, but to something unseen. Her words are slow, deliberate. You don't understand the language, but the meaning is clear. She's not reciting a memorized prayer. She's reporting a vision. And the others listen like this is normal. Like sharing visions is part of the nightly flow. Historians still argue whether Egyptian rituals truly produced these kinds of shared trips, or if modern people are projecting their ayahuasca retreat expectations onto ancient texts. But some records, like those in the Temple of Dendera, contain extremely vivid, symbolic art that makes you wonder. Giant, light bulb-shaped lotus flowers? Snake-headed deities coiled through tubes? That stuff screams visionary state. Suddenly, you notice something new. The courtyard tiles are shifting slightly, not physically, but optically. Like the geometry is pulsing to a hidden beat. The longer you stare, the more the edges glow with a kind of inner gold. You blink and look away. Too much. But you're not scared. You're fascinated. A whisper of a joke. You know it's good kush when the geometry starts teaching math. The woman's humming shifts into chanting. She's repeating a name now, over and over, each time with a little more awe. You realize it's a god's name, or maybe a spirit. It's hard to tell in this light, but you understand the point. This wasn't about numbing pain. This was about calling something in. Maybe the Kushites didn't just bring trade goods. Maybe they brought techniques, practices. The Egyptians were famously open-minded in their spiritual borrowings. They adapted, blended, refined. If cannabis arrived through Nubian channels, the Egyptians would have found a sacred way to use it within a week, probably with hieroglyphic instructions and a fancy incense burner. You rise quietly, careful not to disturb the ritual. The trio continues in their trance, now swaying gently together, like reeds in the Nile breeze. You walk away, the scent of their smoke still clinging to your linen. You feel lighter, not just physically, like something opened in your chest. The stars overhead seem brighter now. You pass a carved column and catch a glimpse of a painted figure, Osiris, green-skinned and serene, holding a crook and flail. You wonder if he ever got high. You bet he did. The night thickens around you as you step beyond the courtyard and into the cool, shifting sand of the desert's edge. The temple behind you glows faintly in the distance, a womb of incense and chants. But out here, it's different. Raw, vast, and, if the stories are true, much weirder. You trudge slowly through the dunes, the sand like warm sugar under your feet. Above you, stars wheel silently across the black. You're following no path, just instinct. Maybe a whisper, maybe something you heard inside the temple. It said, "Go out, go further." And so here you are, headed for a place where the ancient ones, the real out-there mystics, brewed up potions that may have bent time. You crest a dune, and there it is, a ring of jagged stones, blackened in the center from old fires. Half-buried amphorae glinting under moonlight. This wasn't a campsite. It was a lab, a launch pad. This is where it's rumored the desert shamans gathered to make a brew not unlike ayahuasca, though Egypt had no yagé vine, no psychotria leaves. Still, the ingredients were here. You just had to know where to look and have a strong stomach. A mainstream historical fact. The Egyptian desert held dozens of herbs with psychoactive potential. Plants like mandrake, henbane, datura, and possibly even Acacia nilotica, which contains dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, one of the most powerful hallucinogens known to modern chemistry. You settle into the stone ring, as if by invitation. And now imagine a hooded figure stirring a pot, chanting softly. The steam smells like honeyed roots and citrus, with a hint of something sharp, burnt shell or bark. It fills your nose, your tongue tingles. The cup is handed to you. You hesitate. A joke slips in. Side effects may include snakes made of fire and an existential review of your life choices. You drink. Not all at once. You're cautious. The brew is warm and gritty, and bitter. So bitter it makes your eyes water. You blink, shake your head, and the sand shifts beneath you like a living thing. That's when the real show begins. Your heartbeat slows, or maybe it speeds up. It's hard to tell. Your vision tunnels, then expands. You see geometric patterns racing across the backs of your eyelids. Then, eyes open or closed, it doesn't matter. You see a serpent. Not just any snake. This one is made of stars. It rises from the sand like smoke. It coils around your body, not menacingly, but protectively. You don't scream. You smile. You feel known. As if this glowing celestial being has been waiting for you across all your lives. Historians still argue whether Egyptians used such brews in controlled rituals, or if these desert rites were the domain of fringe mystics outside the temple system. What we do know is that the Egyptians revered snakes, not just as animals, but as symbols of wisdom and rebirth. The uraeus, the cobra worn on the brow of pharaohs, was more than fashion. It was divine fire. And here in the desert, with the stars burning holes in the sky, you understand why. The serpent speaks, not with words, but with sensations, images. You see the Nile from above, winding like a green vein through gold. You see pyramids under construction, not from outside, but through the eyes of a worker, sweat pouring, hands trembling as stone grinds against stone. Then you're floating, higher, through clouds, past the sun, into realms where gods don't look like humans anymore. They're fractals, eyes, echoes of thought. You laugh. You can't help it. The desert echoes back, a fringe tidbit. Some researchers have posited that certain Egyptian visionary states were induced by smoke and ingestible herbs used only during lunar alignments, particularly during Sirius's rising, an event so sacred it marked the start of the Egyptian calendar. If so, these rituals were timed to cosmic rhythms, unlocking visions only when the stars aligned. You come back slowly. The fire pit is cold now. The desert's silent. Your skin feels electrified, like you've just returned from orbit. A nearby rock bears an engraving, a man with his head open, and a bird flying out. Maybe that's what this place was really for. Releasing the bird, you lean back, letting the cool sand cradle you. The DMT, or whatever brew you imagined, is wearing off, but not entirely. The world looks clearer now, sharper, kinder even. Another joke arrives, slow and dusty. Congratulations, you've unlocked ancient Egyptian ultra mode. Good luck explaining that to your camel. You're not sure how long you rest there, but eventually, footsteps crunch through the sand. Another traveler, maybe real, maybe imagined, doesn't matter. You're not alone. Because here's the secret you've discovered. In the deserts of ancient Egypt, getting high wasn't escape. It was exploration, a way to map the soul, to draw connections between stars and breath, between death and dreaming. You rise slowly, brushing sand from your clothes. The desert has gifted you something, clarity? A vision, maybe just a solid nap in warm silence. Whatever it is, you're grateful, and you start walking back toward the temple. The stars twinkle above, and you wonder if they're watching, or winking. You step back into the temple compound, just as the first faint hints of dawn brush the sky with pale violet. But there's no rooster crowing here, only the rhythmic pounding of wooden mallets echoing from the embalmer's quarters. That's where you're headed next. It's a side of Egypt few tourists ask about, the part that smells like resin, death, and mystery. And maybe mandrake. Definitely mandrake. You push open a heavy wooden door and step into a low-lit room filled with strange tools, hooks, blades, linen wrappings, and several jars lined neatly against the wall. A man leans over a body, murmuring prayers as he works. This isn't horror, it's reverence. You're in the holy business of preparing someone for the afterlife. And here's the secret. Sometimes, the dead weren't the only ones who left their bodies. A mainstream fact, ancient Egyptian embalmers were highly skilled and deeply spiritual. They believed in preserving the body so the soul could recognize it and return to it. Organs were removed, the corpse dehydrated with natron, then anointed with oils and wrapped carefully in linen, often over 40 days of work. But as you watch, another process unfolds. A dark vial is uncorked, and the scent of mandrake root fills the air, pungent, earthy, and slightly sweet. It cuts through the heaviness like a whisper, and you realize the embalmer isn't just preserving, he's communing. Mandrake isn't just a Harry Potter plant. It's real, it's powerful, and yes, it can absolutely mess you up. Known as Mandragora officinarum, this root contains compounds that can induce hallucinations, euphoria, and in high doses, full-blown delirium. And Egyptians used it, often in oils, sometimes in wine, and almost certainly during sacred rituals. A fringe tidbit? Some texts suggest that mandrake wasn't just applied to the dead, but used by the living embalmers to induce altered states during mummification. Why? To see into the beyond, to ask the gods if the soul was ready, to hear instructions directly from the departed. You crouch near a low altar and notice small cakes, likely filled with herbs. Another vial, marked with faded ink, smells like sweet myrrh and something chemical. Like ancient ether, you're told it's used to quiet the spirit, but you're not sure whose. The embalmer hums softly now, a tune so old it predates written language. His assistant, a young woman with a shaved head, paints runes onto the bandages using a mixture of ochre and crushed petals. She pauses to anoint her own temples with oil, probably the same mandrake blend. Her pupils dilate slightly. Her movements slow. Historians still argue whether these trance-like states were mystical tools or just coping mechanisms for those working intimately with the dead. But one thing is clear, this wasn't just medicine. It was a ritualized chemical experience. And not all the chemicals were metaphorical. Your head begins to swim slightly from the fumes. You're not even ingesting anything, but the ambient effects are real. You steady yourself against a column painted with scenes of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming. His eyes seem to glow. A joke flutters into your mind, warning, prolonged exposure to mummification chambers may cause existential vertigo and an unusual affection for linen. You blink and focus. Now the assistant lights a small bundle of herbs and walks in slow circles around the corpse, murmuring in rhythm with the rising smoke. You recognize the scent, henbane, another potent psychoactive. Used to relieve pain, induce sleep, and in higher doses, well, let's just say it makes death feel optional. One scholar even referred to the embalmer's toolkit as a portable pharmacy of the afterlife, which is both poetic and terrifying. You move deeper into the chamber and find a wall etched with instructions, lines of hieroglyphs that read like both medical notes and spellwork. Mix oil of myrrh with crushed mandrake, speak the name of the sun, bind with linen during the second hour of Ra. It's like an ancient recipe crossed with a moonlit incantation. A mainstream fact worth noting. Mandrake was mentioned in the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest known medical texts. It was used for sedation, fertility, and sometimes in love spells. But its hallucination-inducing powers. That's where the lines between medicine and magic blur entirely. You look back toward the body. It's nearly wrapped now. The face is covered, and a golden mask is being pressed gently into place. Not a pharaoh, just a merchant maybe, but honored all the same. The embalmer closes his eyes and whispers a final prayer. Then, slowly, with hands still stained in oil, he picks up a shallow bowl of thick wine and drinks. You suspect it's laced with mandrake too, and in that moment, he changes. His body doesn't move, but something about him expands. You can't explain it. His presence floods the room, almost like another being has entered. He speaks in a voice deeper than his own, smoother. The assistant listens, nods solemnly, and records his words on a strip of papyrus. Historians still argue whether this was genuine possession, theatrical performance, or simply an altered mental state. But you just watched a man cross over and return with instructions. You step back, heart pounding slightly. The embalming chamber has transformed into something else. Not a morgue, not a lab, a threshold. And the plants, the herbs, the fumes, those were the tools to cross it safely. You head toward the exit. The sun is rising now. Light spills in through a high slit in the wall, illuminating the golden face of the mummy. Peaceful, ready. Outside, a breeze carries the scent of desert blossoms and burned herbs. You breathe deeply and feel something shift inside you. A quiet joke lingers. If I die in Egypt, please pack snacks, linen, and a little mandrake, just in case. The scent of mandrake still clings to your skin as you step into a narrow corridor, lit only by the glow of a single oil lamp. This part of the temple feels quieter, more insulated from the ritual thrum. You can almost hear your own thoughts again, until a faint scratching breaks the silence. You turn the corner and find them, the scribes. Not the ones who write down laws or count grain. These scribes are different. They sit cross-legged on woven mats, hunched over papyrus scrolls, ink pots at their sides, heads wrapped in pale linen. Their chambers are filled with symbols, scattered scrolls, crushed pigments, and something that smells oddly floral and minty. One of them looks up at you, eyes wide and glassy, pupils far too large for the candlelight. Yeah, these guys are tripping. You ease closer, and the air becomes thick with the scent of sweet flag, a plant known today as Acorus calamus. It's believed to have mild psychoactive properties, especially when chewed or brewed. Ancient texts mention it as a purifier of thought, a friend to focus. But some think it did far more than just sharpen memory. A mainstream fact: Egyptian scribes were not just record keepers, they were mystics, philosophers, and artists rolled into one. They chronicled spells, star maps, and even visions. In temples like Karnak and Edfu, scribe priests worked deep inside sanctuaries, composing prayers and diagrams that guided the soul through the afterlife. But sometimes, those writings? They read more like dream journals. One scroll you peek at contains phrases like "the serpent of silver wrapped around the sun" and "a stairway of feathers through the sky." That's not tax records. That's a vision. A fringe theory? Some Egyptologists suggest certain scribes deliberately induced altered states to see sacred texts, then wrote what they experienced. Not copied, not composed. Transcribed from another realm. The scribe before you dips a reed into blue ink and begins to write, eyes half closed. The letters come in a rush, flowing like water, each one precise despite his dazed expression. You notice a small bowl beside him, filled with the crushed roots of blue lotus and what looks like dried date skins soaked in wine. A thinking tonic, maybe, or a low-key cosmic hotline. Historians still argue whether this use of plants by scribes was officially sanctioned or just a rogue practice among more mystical circles. But even the mainstream records speak of dreams guiding writing. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, was believed to whisper truth to those who sought knowledge. Some temples even had dream chambers just for that purpose. A whisper of a joke forms. Modern writers drink coffee. Ancient Egyptian writers? Visions from Thoth and an herbal cocktail that makes the alphabet vibrate. The chamber shifts again. A young apprentice scribe enters with a tray, small honey cakes, more date wine, and something wrapped in linen cloth. He kneels and offers it to one of the elder scribes, who nods and places the bundle near a glowing brazier. It releases a faint stream of grayish smoke, earthy and sharp. You recognize it now. Syrian rue, a plant that, when burned or ingested, can act as an MAOI, intensifying the effects of other psychoactive substances. In the right mix, it's like adding a subwoofer to your Vision Quest playlist. The scribe leans forward, breathes in the smoke, and begins to chant, not words, but tones. Long, melodic syllables that seem to vibrate the stone itself. You swear the ink on his scroll shimmers as he chants, like it's still alive. You glance at another scroll nearby. It's filled with symbols you've seen before, ankhs, scarabs, suns, but they're arranged in a spiral, not in rows. Around it are notes in smaller script. One line reads, "The voice of the falcon is the light between breath and flame." Nope, not your average grocery list. A mainstream fact. Ancient Egyptian writing wasn't just linguistic, it was spiritual. Every symbol had power, every arrangement mattered. The act of writing could itself be a spell. And if you were trying to channel the divine, you better believe you wanted your mind just a little extra open. A breeze stirs the chamber. Or maybe it's just you swaying slightly from the aromatic overload. You lean against a pillar carved with scenes of Thoth, the divine scribe, holding a writing palette and laughing softly. You almost hear his voice. Try spelling that after 2 cups of lotus wine. You close your eyes for a second, and suddenly, you see the chamber differently. The scribes glow faintly. Lines of light run from their heads into the papyri. The scrolls pulse with energy. The ink dances. Then, blink, and it's all normal again. Or was it ever? You turn to leave, but pause at a final scroll. It's a list of names, hundreds of them. At the top, those who saw with more than eyes. You wonder how many of them came through this very room, seeking truth, guided by smoke, root, and rhythm. The scribe closest to you looks up again and finally speaks. Write only what you become. You don't have an answer for that, so you bow your head, whisper thanks, and slip quietly back into the corridor. The scent of ink and lotus clings to you now, And somewhere deep in your mind, a spiral of symbols begins to turn. The corridor opens into a high, vaulted chamber, and suddenly, the air changes again. Heavier. Thicker. You feel it hit your face like a velvet curtain. Warm, perfumed, mysterious. You've entered the scent chamber. There are no scribes here, no chanting priests. Just smell. Deep, layered smell. You inhale, and 1,000 aromas unfold at once. Spicy cinnamon, bitter resin, sticky sweet myrrh, damp earth, and something sharp and almost citrusy, like crushed green leaves. You're in the part of the temple where incense isn't just burned, it's crafted, measured, aged, concocted like alchemy. This is the home of Kaifi, Egypt's most sacred scent. A mainstream historical fact, Kaifi was a legendary incense blend used in both temple ceremonies and medicine. Plutarch even wrote about it, centuries later, noting it was burned in the evening to aid sleep and spiritual clarity. Ingredients included honey, raisins, wine, myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, and other herbs. Some recipes included over 16 components. But the real magic? It wasn't just smell, it was effect. You're not sniffing some store-bought sandalwood stick here. You're inhaling intent. A woman in a linen wrap moves past you, placing dried herbs into a bronze bowl. She isn't just blending spices, she's building a state of mind. Around her, other workers stir, grind, and dry ingredients under woven shades. This is a lab for the soul. You settle near the back wall, trying to stay invisible, and immediately feel your limbs relaxing. It's involuntary. Like your muscles just heard a lullaby. The blend being burned right now is rich with calamus, juniper, and what smells like steeped raisins soaked in wine. As the smoke rises, you catch a flicker of movement on the far wall. No, not movement. Just a painted mural of a falcon flying through clouds. But it feels like it just shifted. Fringe tidbit. Some versions of Kaifi may have included psychoactive components, possibly blue lotus, mandrake, or even hashish derivatives, used in such small doses that inhalation would nudge the brain gently sideways without tipping it into full hallucination. A sacred nudge. Just enough to make you think the gods were whispering, and maybe they were. You watch as a young novice gently crushes dried fruit with a polished pestle. The paste glistens in the sunlight, then gets mixed with resins, spices, and wine. It's sticky and strong. She carefully molds it into little nuggets and places them on a stone tray to dry in the heat. These aren't snacks. These are keys. Historians still argue whether Kaifi was used purely for ceremony, medicine, or even casual domestic use. Some believe it was applied as perfume or burned in homes to keep evil spirits away. Others claim it was restricted only to temples and tombs, treated like sacred currency. A joke floats in. Imagine Febreze, but formulated by high priests and stored in golden jars that weigh more than your car. You lean closer to the brazier as another blend is ignited. This one? It's sharper. There's henna in it. And mastic resin. The smoke is denser, greasier. You breathe in and feel your scalp tingle. The women working here are almost silent, focused. It's not because they're being watched, it's because they know this work has consequences. You notice a papyrus hanging by the entryway. It's a list of scent pairings for different gods. Frankincense for Ra, myrrh for Isis, Kaifi for Thoth. The idea that gods have signature fragrances? Kind of beautiful, and weirdly modern. You close your eyes and let the scent wash over you. It doesn't just smell good, it moves through you, reminding your lungs how to breathe slower, your spine how to loosen, your heart how to quiet down. It's incense therapy, but also more. A mainstream fact worth noting: ancient Egyptians believed that scent was spirit. To smell something was to invite its essence inside you. That's why priests bathed twice a day, shaved their bodies, and scented themselves from head to toe. Cleanliness wasn't hygiene, it was ritual readiness. And in this chamber, you feel ready. For anything, the fire pops. A burst of resin hits the flame, and suddenly your vision blurs. Just a little. You sit down quickly, unsure if you're lightheaded or just moved. Then, another shift. The mural of the falcon doesn't just flicker this time, it flies. Only in your mind, of course. Probably. Maybe. You hear a name whispered from somewhere, Sekhmet. The lion-headed goddess of war and plague. Her scent? Charred cinnamon and dark cedar. That's what the next blend will be. One worker begins unwrapping a dark chunk of resin that smells like burnt oranges and fire. You whisper her name to yourself, and your arms prickle with goosebumps. A quiet joke. If your incense can summon a lion goddess, you're probably not supposed to buy it in bulk. One woman begins to hum, low, slow, not quite a tune, more like a vibration. The others pick it up gradually. There's no conductor, no start signal, just shared rhythm. You watch their hands move in perfect timing, passing powders, shaping patties, never missing a beat. You realize something. This is dance. This is meditation. This is alchemy. The kaifi isn't just transforming the air, it's transforming them. And now, you feel oddly whole here. Still, like your thoughts aren't racing anymore. You've gone from the sandstorms of DMT and mandrake to something deeper, calm immersion, scent, ritual, repetition. This is the slow high, the sustainable one. You rise gently and bow to the women who barely acknowledge you. Not because they're rude, but because they're in a different world, a better one. As you walk away, the smoke trails behind you like a silk ribbon, and you smile. You smell divine. The corridor brightens now, not just with sunlight filtering in, but with sound. Laughter. Clapping. The distant beat of hand drums, flutes, and the unmistakable ring of sistrums. You feel it in your chest before you even see where it's coming from. And suddenly, you're stepping into one of the most bizarre, beautiful, and downright lit festivals in ancient Egypt. Welcome to the Feast of Drunkenness. No, seriously, that's its actual name. A mainstream historical fact. The Feast of Drunkenness was an annual celebration dedicated to the lioness goddess Sekhmet, later softened into the gentler Hathor. It commemorated the myth where Ra, angered by humanity, sent Sekhmet to destroy them. She nearly wiped out mankind, until Ra tricked her into drinking vats of dyed beer, which she mistook for blood. She got so drunk, she passed out, and humanity was spared. Naturally, the Egyptians turned this into a party. Because trauma. You stand just outside a courtyard where revelers dance, twirl, and fall over themselves in laughter. Music swells from every direction. The drums are irregular, chaotic, perfect. The smell? A blend of spilled beer, roasting fish, and crushed flowers. You step inside and are handed a cup immediately. You don't even question it anymore. The cup is filled with thick, spiced beer, slightly sour, warm, and surprisingly strong. You take a sip, then another. Then forget the cup entirely because a stranger is tugging you into a circle of dancers. You spin. You sweat. You laugh harder than you have in hours. A fringe tidbit. Some archaeologists believe that the beer at these festivals wasn't just fermented barley, but was infused with blue lotus or other plant extracts to produce mild euphoria and altered states. This wasn't just about getting drunk. This was engineered ecstasy. Someone smears red ochre onto your arms. Another person crowns you with a garland of papyrus flowers. You glance around and realize everyone here is wearing something floral. The scent of sweat and perfume fills the space like a living incense. One man begins howling, literally howling, at the sky. Someone else hands him a tambourine. No one is judging. This is the whole point. Historians still argue whether the Feast of Drunkenness was a wild public free-for-all or a more contained, ritual-heavy temple rite. Some texts suggest it began at dawn, with carefully planned hymns, but quickly descended into joyful chaos. Others hint that the real purpose was divine communion, using drunkenness to blur the line between human and divine. A joke bubbles up in your mind. Ancient Egypt, where blacking out was officially endorsed by priests and possibly encouraged by gods. You stumble into the shade of a large sycamore tree, breathless and flushed. Around you, couples lounge on blankets. Musicians press their lips to flutes and drums without missing a beat. One woman twirls in slow motion, arms raised, dress fluttering like wings. Her eyes are closed. She's not dancing for anyone. She's dancing with something. You begin to realize this isn't just a party. This is worship, sacred revelry. It's church, but with better music, stronger drinks, and no lectures. The priests in their white linen. They're out here too, dancing, singing, swaying with everyone else. You spot one sprinkling flower petals into a fire while giggling uncontrollably. You sit down next to a platter of dried figs and cheese. A stranger offers you a slice of melon soaked in wine. You take it. You don't even think. The juice drips down your chin. You laugh again. Another mainstream fact: Hathor, the goddess celebrated at this feast, wasn't just the patron of love and beauty. She was the goddess of intoxication, music, and joy. Her temples often featured ritual musicians and dancers. She was both motherly and wild, a protector, but also a seducer. Her festivals were about embracing life with every sense turned on. And right now, your senses are overclocked. A tambourine slaps the ground beside you. Someone starts a chant, short, catchy, hypnotic. People join in. You do too. You don't even know what it means, but you feel it. It shakes something loose in you. You forget where you came from. You forget time. You become joy. A whisper reaches your ear. Drink deeply, friend. This is what keeps the gods asleep. You glance up. It's an older woman, eyes ringed with kohl, smile sly. She offers you a small clay cup. You don't ask what's in it. You drink. Sweet, thick, maybe lotus, maybe honey wine, maybe something that makes your vision sparkle slightly at the edges. Historians still argue whether these altered states were purely symbolic or real, visceral transformations. Some records hint at possession, of dancing so hard, singing so loud, that you let the goddess take over your body. For a few glorious minutes, you become Hathor. You lean back into the grass, the sun hot on your face. Around you, the world pulses with energy. The music is everywhere. You close your eyes. You see a cow-headed woman with stars in her eyes and wine on her lips. She winks. You blink awake, unsure how long you've been out. Someone draped a cloth over you. A plate of bread sits nearby. The party is still going, but slower now. Louder laughter has faded into sleepy murmurs and off-key humming. The feast is winding down. A gentle joke flickers. If you don't wake up with flower petals in your mouth, did you even ancient Egypt properly? You rise slowly, light-headed, happy. There's no hangover. Just a full-body warmth that lingers in your bones. As you leave the courtyard, you glance back once more at the worshippers sprawled on blankets, under trees, under sky. You smile, because sometimes the path to the divine is paved in spilled beer, shared fruit, and the rhythm of a drum that won't quite let you go. The music fades behind you as you slip through another stone archway, leaving the laughter and dancing of the feast of drunkenness behind. Now, the ground grows cooler under your bare feet. The stone is smoother, the air more still, almost unnaturally quiet. You've left celebration behind and stepped into something different. You're not alone. Faint torchlight flickers ahead, leading the way down a hall lined with low-relief carvings, gods holding ankhs to foreheads, serpents curled around human bodies, eyes wide open mid-dream. You realize this isn't just another wing of the temple. You're entering a dream temple. A mainstream historical fact: ancient Egyptians constructed special healing centers known as sleep temples, or temples of incubation. Here, the sick or spiritually troubled would sleep in sacred spaces in hopes of receiving healing dreams, often believed to be sent by Imhotep, a deified healer, or by gods like Serapis and Thoth. It was part early hospital, part cosmic sleepover. You follow the torchlight into a vast chamber filled with rows of low beds carved from limestone and softened by layers of linen and palm fiber padding. No guards, no priests. Just sleepers, some murmuring softly in their sleep, others perfectly still, arms folded across their chests like miniature mummies. And you're next. No words, just a small cup passed to you silently. You recognize the smell immediately, blue lotus wine, rich and heady. But something else too, a bitter undercurrent, maybe mandrake, maybe poppy seed. You lie back, cradling the cup, and sip slowly. The stars overhead aren't painted. There's no ceiling, just sky, or the illusion of one. As you drink, the stars shimmer and shift slightly, swirling like dust in water. Then, the sound. Not music, not voices. A low humming, felt more in your teeth than your ears. It pulses softly, like breath, like something alive beneath the stone. A fringe tidbit. Some fringe researchers suggest these temples were designed with acoustic resonance in mind, built to vibrate at frequencies that could affect brainwaves, enhancing dreams or trances, stone acting like tuning forks. The hum of the gods, literally built into the walls. You glance around and see small braziers emitting coils of henna and frankincense smoke, a scent said to stimulate visions while purifying the mind. The combination with Lotus? Let's just say your eyelids are suddenly heavy. Really heavy. You let them close, and the dreams arrive. You're floating, above your own body, above the temple, above the desert. The Nile winds beneath you like a ribbon of emerald light. The land is awake. You see herds of ibex glowing like fireflies. You see pyramids beneath the sand, pulsing like hearts. Then, a presence. A god? A guide? A projection of your own thoughts. Whatever it is, it looks like a tall figure with the head of a cobra and a cloak made of stars. It speaks, but not in words. It shows you images. You see a snake biting its own tail. A mirror that reflects not your face, but your shadow. A river that flows backward. You want to ask questions, but your mouth won't open. You realize it doesn't need to. Historians still argue whether these dreams were interpreted literally, symbolically, or if they were guided by temple priests pretending to be divine messengers. Some temples had interpreters who would counsel dreamers after they woke, acting almost like ancient therapists. A subtle joke bubbles up in your dream mind. Tell me about your serpent. How did that make you feel? The dream shifts. Now you're a crocodile. Now you're water. Now you're a grain of sand lodged in the eye of a sphinx. Each moment blurs into the next with no warning. But instead of panic, you feel wonder, peace. You hear a woman's voice in your ear, but she's not speaking. She's singing without breath. In sleep, we return to the place where gods are born. You want to remember that. You hope you will. Suddenly, you're back in the chamber. The stars overhead have stilled. The humming has stopped. The cup is empty beside you. And in your palm, placed while you slept, is a small stone carved into the shape of a coiled snake. A token. A souvenir. Or maybe just proof you didn't imagine the whole thing. A mainstream fact again. Snakes were symbols of healing in ancient Egypt, especially the cobra, the uraeus, worn on the brows of pharaohs. It represented protection, energy, awakening. Perfect for a dream temple. Perfect for you. You sit up slowly. Around you, other dreamers are stirring, blinking in the low light. Some cry. Some laugh softly to themselves. One man stands up and walks directly to the wall, begins drawing something with his fingers in the dust. You don't know what it means, but it's beautiful. You rise and follow the blue-robed woman through a quiet passage. No words are exchanged. Just a nod. She places your stone token into a small pouch and hands it back. The implication is clear. You're meant to carry this. You walk back out into the morning air, lighter than before, like a piece of your dream came with you. And maybe it did. Another joke, this time from your own thoughts. Best sleep of my life. 10:10. Would commune with serpent gods again. You smile. Because in the temples of ancient Egypt, dreaming wasn't an escape from life. It was a return to the source. A meeting with gods, spirits, ancestors, or just your own deepest truth. And now, you carry that dream with you. In your step, in your breath, in the small, cool weight of the coiled stone in your hand. The sun is higher now, but the temple corridors somehow remain dim and cool. You move slowly, dream-touched, still holding your coiled stone, the echo of stars flickering behind your eyes. But that sense of stillness doesn't last long, because now you hear something else, something louder, wilder. Not drums this time, not flutes. It's the sound of voices raised in something between a chant and a shout. You follow it, and then you hear screaming. Okay, let's not panic. Not yet. You round a corner and step into a narrow chamber packed with people. No dancers, no scribes. This is something else entirely. The air crackles with energy, almost electric, and in the middle of it all, a woman sways violently, eyes rolled back, arms trembling, mouth open in a silent cry. She's not alone. A circle has formed around her, priests, priestesses, temple attendants. Some hold amulets. Others fan incense smoke toward her face. One holds her shoulders as she jerks again, convulsing like she's caught between worlds. You've walked into a divine possession ritual, or something pretending to be one. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians believed that gods could enter and speak through human vessels. In temple rituals, priests would sometimes act as the mouth of a god, declaring messages, commands, even prophecies, in the deity's voice. This wasn't metaphorical. It was sacred theater, or divine download. But in less formal spaces, especially in folk practices or household rituals, possession could be messier, louder, scarier, more real. You edge closer to the circle. The possessed woman begins to speak, but not in her own voice. It's lower, rougher, like gravel and thunder. She names herself as Taret, goddess of childbirth and protection. Someone immediately begins taking notes on a scrap of papyrus. And just to keep things spicy, let's add a fringe tidbit. Some scholars believe that what we'd now call possession was induced by datura or other psychoactive substances used to trigger trance states. In low doses, datura can induce visions and speech-like episodes. In higher doses, it can cause total disorientation, memory loss, or, in ancient Egypt, communion with gods. Was this woman actually touched by the divine, or just halfway through a very intense trip? Historians still argue whether these rituals were staged, coordinated acts passed down from priest to priest, or if they were unpredictable, raw experiences driven by substance and suggestion. The truth? Probably both. Probably neither. That's the magic of it. You notice a small bowl near the woman's feet. Inside, crushed herbs, sticky resin, and what looks like powdered root, possibly henbane, another psychoactive used to dull pain, induce visions, and sometimes, yes, trigger full-body delirium. Also, maybe a touch of blue lotus. And the incense they're fanning toward her? That's not for decoration. That's fuel. A joke nudges your mind. Note to self, never accept unlabeled incense at an ancient Egyptian party, especially if someone's already screaming. Suddenly, the woman collapses forward. Two attendants catch her gently. A hush falls over the room. Then, a priest steps forward, holding a mirror polished to an almost supernatural shine. He places it in front of her face. She opens her eyes and gasps. Not like she's afraid. Like she's seeing herself for the first time in lifetimes. Another fact to ground you. Mirrors, often made of polished copper, were tools of ritual and divination in Egypt. Some believed they could show not just reflections, but truths or glimpses of the afterlife. Others say they were portals for spirits to pass through. You watch her expression shift from fear to calm, then peace. The trance has passed. She's helped to her feet, swaying, but smiling now. Someone gives her water. Another places a flower necklace around her shoulders. This isn't seen as shameful. It's a gift. She's not whispered about. She's honored. The mirror is set down, and you catch your own face in it for just a moment. And for just a moment, your eyes don't look like your own. Moving on. You leave the chamber slowly, breath shallow. That scene stays with you. The energy. The voice that wasn't hers. The smoke. The possibility. Because here's the thing. Possession in ancient Egypt wasn't horror movie material. It wasn't something to be exorcised. It was sought after. Revered. Gods didn't knock. They entered. Through smoke, song, and surrender. And sometimes, through the right combination of incense and trauma. You step outside and let the sun warm your face again. A breeze carries the smell of charcoal and perfume. But beneath it all, there's something else, something feral, something you felt in that room. It lingers. A thought creeps in. What if every ritual, every sacrament, every drop of blue lotus and dusting of henbane, what if it was all just preparation for this? For letting go, for being used, for speaking with someone else's mouth. A gentle, funny thought follows. Maybe that's what caffeine is, modern possession. You drink it, and suddenly the productivity god speaks through you for 8 hours straight. You chuckle to yourself, then immediately wonder if that's how these priests felt, drunk on vision, touched by flame, sweaty, sleep-deprived, and completely in service to something bigger. You glance at the coiled stone in your pouch, still cool, still watching, and then you keep walking. Because if the gods are speaking through people, you kind of want to see who they'll choose next. The corridor twists again, narrowing and darkening, then finally opens up into a low, lamp-lit chamber that feels tender, like it's been touched by soft hands. Everything smells sweet, jasmine, rosewater, maybe even vanilla. The walls here are painted with delicate figures, women offering flowers, lovers embracing, hands holding hands. You're in a space dedicated to the magic of love. But don't get the wrong idea. This isn't some romantic getaway. This is where the Egyptians practiced love spells, fertility rites, and ritual aphrodisiacs. And based on the shelves of dried herbs, little clay amulets, and offerings of honey cakes lining the room, they weren't shy about it. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians had an incredibly detailed understanding of love and sexuality, reflected in their mythology, medicine, and magic. They wrote love poems, used amulets shaped like deities and organs, and practiced fertility rituals to bless unions, ensure pregnancy, and sometimes nudge someone into returning your affections. You crouch beside a low table where a priestess is mixing something in a shallow bowl, dark, glossy, almost chocolate-like. She dips her finger and licks it, then giggles quietly. You glance around and notice others nearby doing the same. It's a blend of honey, date syrup, and crushed blue lotus, with something else, something spiced, maybe fennel seed, known for its warming effect. Or even myrrh, often used in oils that were applied to the skin during intimacy. She offers you a taste. You try it. It's delicious and surprisingly warming. Within minutes, your fingers tingle. Your chest feels buzzy. Your thoughts begin to drift downward. You look around, and suddenly the figures on the wall seem more animated. The women's eyes glisten with intention. The men lean forward with suggestion. You realize, this room isn't just about love. It's about desire. Real, physical, pulse-quickening desire. And the Egyptians didn't separate that from the sacred. A fringe tidbit. Some Egyptian love spells involved ingesting herbal mixtures meant to heighten arousal or stimulate dreams of the beloved. Ingredients included mandrake, saffron, and sometimes opium, used not to dull, but to draw one deeper into emotional surrender. Historians still argue whether these practices were folk remedies, religious rites, or something in between. What's known is that these spells were often gendered, highly symbolic, and deeply sensual. They involved oils rubbed on mirrors, whispered names, and charms buried near thresholds or beds. You move to another part of the chamber, where two figures, a man and a woman, are kneeling across from each other, hands on each other's hearts, eyes closed. A priestess circles them slowly, anointing their foreheads with oil and placing rose petals in their joined palms. This isn't a wedding. It's something older, intimate, maybe preparatory. You overhear a soft chant being repeated by several women. Open the path, sweet goddess, let the fire come gently. This could be a fertility rite, or a spell to renew love between two partners, or a ritual to welcome a child into the womb. A joke slips into your mind. Meanwhile, in modern times, people are still using scented candles and playlists. Egypt just got there first, and added a prayer. You wander over to a small display of tokens. Tiny carved images of Bes, the dwarf god of fertility, protection, and childbirth, grin up at you. He's squat, bearded, and sticking out his tongue. Not exactly sexy, but somehow comforting. You lift one. It's heavier than expected. Maybe lead, maybe clay packed with something else. The label says it was used in childbirth rituals. You set it back down gently. On another shelf, there are perfume bottles, some sealed with wax. One bears a symbol that looks like Hathor's sistrum. It's labeled simply oil of devotion. A priestess walks past and murmurs, "Don't smell that unless you're ready to follow someone home." You laugh, then immediately wonder how much of that was a joke. A mainstream fact: perfumes and oils were crucial in Egyptian love and sex magic. They were worn, offered, burned, and even mixed into wine. Cleopatra was said to have soaked her sails in perfume before meeting Mark Antony, just to make an entrance. Seduction, scent, and symbolism were intertwined. Back near the entrance, you find a cluster of small papyri scrolls, love spells, scratched out in careful handwriting. Some ask for reunion. Some beg for escape. One simply says, "Let him dream of me every night until he comes." And suddenly, this room isn't so funny anymore. It's tender, it's human, it's desperate and magical and raw. Because whether you were royalty or a brickmaker, Egyptian love was messy and mystical. People tried everything: incense, prayers, figs, blue lotus, even crocodile fat, don't ask, to spark something in the heart of someone else. Sometimes for joy, sometimes for power, always for connection. You sit on a low cushion and breathe in. The room is thick with rose, lotus, and something smoky, maybe cinnamon. You feel flushed, not embarrassed, just alive. Another joke tiptoes in. Modern dating apps could never. You smile, and maybe, for a second, you whisper someone's name, just to see if it sticks to the incense smoke curling toward the ceiling. Because here, in this perfumed room filled with honeyed herbs and soft chanting, love isn't just a feeling. It's an action, a spell, a mixture, a hope, and it smells amazing. The warm, fragrant haze of the love chamber fades behind you, replaced by something cooler, sharper. The hallway you walk now is quieter, more sterile. There's no music here, no incense smoke curling through the air. Just the subtle clink of tools, the occasional low chant, and the unmistakable smell of medicine. You've entered the pharaoh's pharmacopoeia. This isn't a place of performance or celebration. This is a clinic, and a sophisticated one. Clay jars, copper tools, racks of linen bandages, and long scrolls line the walls, each marked with symbols indicating ailments and cures. In the corner, a young man grinds herbs with a stone mortar, and just beside him, a priest is reciting ingredients aloud to a scribe who scribbles furiously onto fresh papyrus. And yes, the ingredients include things like dried scorpion powder, honey infused with myrrh, and dust of green lapis lazuli. Not exactly your neighborhood pharmacy. A mainstream historical fact. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents we've ever found, contains over 700 remedies used by ancient Egyptian doctors. It includes recipes for painkillers, anti-inflammatories, sedatives, and even treatments for mental disturbances, often combining herbal knowledge with spiritual invocations. You pass one table where a woman is having her ankle wrapped with linen soaked in a dark fluid. It smells like cinnamon and vinegar. Her face is tight with pain, but she breathes steadily as a priest whispers something to her, half prayer, half hypnosis. The liquid? Probably acacia extract, sometimes used as a pain reliever, possibly even containing trace amounts of DMT, as you might recall from your desert vision. That same sacred tree pops up again here, only now it's being used as medicine. Fringe tidbit. Some fringe researchers believe acacia and similar compounds weren't just used spiritually, but medically, to dull pain during dental surgeries, childbirth, or broken bones. And since there were no anesthetics as we know them, the line between painkiller and visionary state got very thin. You walk past another bed where a man lies still, his head shaved, his eyes darting rapidly beneath closed lids. Two attendants are fanning him gently, while a priest anoints his temples with oil. He's sweating profusely. You hear one word whispered near him: opium. Yes, they had it. A mainstream fact. The ancient Egyptians imported opium from regions near modern-day Turkey and the Near East. While there's still debate over just how extensively it was used, there's growing evidence that poppy-based mixtures were used for intense pain, especially in cases of surgery or end-of-life care. It was likely ingested in honey or wine, or applied topically in thick pastes. You glance at the man again. He's not screaming. He's not even moaning. Just floating somewhere else. There's a low, rhythmic drumming in the corner, not for ceremony, but for calm. One of the temple healers lightly taps a frame drum as she prepares a poultice of dried mint, coriander, and beer sediment. It's meant for nausea, according to a nearby scroll. The entire room feels like a cross between a hospital, an alchemist's den, and a very calming dream. You turn a corner and find a shelf of small, stoppered bottles, each marked with hieroglyphs and color-coded wax seals. Some are labeled for fever, others for madness of the spirit. Still more are labeled with names you don't recognize, perhaps lost plants or euphemisms for ingredients we'd find unsettling. A priestess notices you eyeing them and lifts one small jar. She uncorks it. The smell hits you instantly, sharp, minty, and strange. Your ears ring for just a moment. She smiles and says, "For the mind, when it won't sit still." You get the message. Historians still argue whether these formulas were truly effective by modern standards, or whether their power lay more in suggestion and ritual. But recent research has shown that many ingredients, garlic, willow bark, honey, pomegranate, aloe, do indeed have medicinal properties. The Egyptians may not have known why things worked, but they knew what worked. A joke drifts in, slow and lazy. You know you're in ancient Egypt when your prescription is 3 drops of poppy wine, a pinch of crushed beetle shell, and a prayer to the ibis-headed god of medicine. You sit beside a work table covered in scrolls. One catches your eye. It's a treatment plan for what seems to be melancholy. The signs are described poetically. Eyes that do not weep, a chest that sinks into itself, a voice that flees the mouth. The remedy: a mixture of blue lotus, wine, honey, and listening to flute music in the presence of fresh flowers. Honestly, that's better than most modern plans. You wander toward the back of the chamber where the more delicate work happens: childbirth, spiritual madness, and the preparation of sedatives. One healer is boiling a thick, reddish liquid in a shallow pot. She stirs clockwise only, and recites a phrase with each rotation. The steam smells like dried roses and bitter resin. Maybe poppy again. Maybe mandrake. Maybe something that shouldn't be used unless you're really sure. You watch her pour it carefully into a bowl, cover it with linen, and label it with a single word: silence. A priest nearby catches your glance and shrugs. Some patients want to forget. We help them sleep. They dream of cool water. You nod. Because what else is there to say? Another mainstream fact: Egyptian medicine wasn't just physical, it was psychological. They believed illness often came from spiritual imbalance, angered spirits, or emotional wounds. Healers treated these not just with herbs, but with storytelling, music, and ritual. The cure was narrative as much as potion. You turn one last time before leaving and take in the room. Healers working gently, patients breathing deeply, the quiet hum of ritual and care. You've seen altered states born of ceremony and chaos, but here, in the pharmacopoeia, it's the precision that's holy. Because sometimes, the way to the gods is through a teaspoon, a prayer, and a bitter burning swallow. You step out of the clinic chamber into a narrower hall. It smells faintly of burnt linen, dried papyrus, and something metallic, like copper, left out in the rain. It's cooler here, and quieter. Too quiet. You don't realize it at first, but your breathing has slowed. Your shoulders tense. You're being watched. No, not by people. By something else. You've entered the space where the doom scrolls are kept, not the ones with pretty prayers or medical remedies. These are different. These are the ones that whisper warnings, tell of curses, nightmares, spiritual collapse. This is where the bad trips live. A mainstream historical fact: ancient Egypt wasn't all healing temples and Blue Lotus joyrides. Many papyri describe spiritual danger, madness sent by gods, nightmares that stalk your sleep, and rituals gone wrong. Spirits of the dead. Demons that slip in when your guard is down. Even overuse of certain herbs was cautioned against, especially if the user was unbalanced. A low shelf houses cracked scrolls bound in leather, their edges singed. One has a warning glyph etched into its clasp, a crude eye with 3 lashes. A priest nearby warns you not to touch unless you're prepared to carry what's inside. Cool. Casual. You glance at the first scroll that's already unfurled. The hieroglyphs are darker, messier, almost scratched in. A section describes a woman who drank too much wine steeped with mandrake and fell into a trance for 5 days. When she awoke, she claimed to have seen her past lives, all of them ending in fire. She stopped speaking and refused food. A priest eventually pulled the serpent from her mouth, and only then did she return to herself. You don't know what that means. You don't want to. A fringe tidbit? In certain spells, hallucinations were described as both gifts and punishments. Visions weren't always from the gods. Some were sent by angry spirits. Others were self-inflicted curses from misuse of sacred mixtures. Some dreams were considered so dangerous they were never written down, only spoken once, and then never repeated. You pick up another scroll, smaller, but heavier. Inside, a single line reads, "He who seeks the eye of the hawk must pass through the mouth of the jackal." Is it poetry, or is it a warning for those attempting to contact Horus while under spiritual influence? Historians still argue whether these scrolls recorded real experiences or were simply morality tales, stories told to keep people from overindulging in ritual substances. But the specificity in many of them, the dates, the names, the outcomes, it suggests something more personal. Like someone needed to tell you, "I saw what waits in the dark." A nervous joke flashes in. Ancient Egyptian Yelp review, 1 star. Saw a crocodile god eat my future self. You chuckle. Alone. The room feels colder now. You move toward a darker alcove where a small circle of stones outlines the floor. Inside it, a shallow bowl filled with blackened resin sits untouched. Around it, phrases are carved into the floor, for visions unwanted. For when the gods speak too loud. For closing the eye. You realize this was a recovery space. Not everyone walked away from a sacred journey smiling and transformed. Sometimes, they came back broken, scared, changed in ways they didn't understand. A priest enters behind you, carrying a bundle of dried reeds. He lays them in a basket beside the bowl and murmurs, "For those who wandered too far." He doesn't look at you, but you feel like he's speaking to your bones. A mainstream fact. Egyptians believed the soul had multiple parts, Ka, Ba, Ach, and others, each responsible for aspects of identity, memory, vitality. When one part strayed too far, a person could become sick, confused, or possessed. Healing required calling those parts back. Sometimes with music, sometimes with ritual smokes, sometimes not at all. You imagine the initiates who sat in this circle, eyes wide and empty after a vision gone sideways. Maybe they flew too high. Maybe they saw what they weren't meant to. Maybe they took one drop too many. The line between divine revelation and spiritual unraveling was thinner than papyrus. And no one ever warned you about that part. You step out of the circle gently, brushing invisible dust from your arms. Your skin feels cooler, your breath faster. You remind yourself this is just history, just symbols and scrolls. Except some things don't feel that distant. On one wall, someone has painted a mural, faded and chipped. It shows a man floating in a river, his eyes empty, a bird flying out of his mouth. At the bottom, written in a child's hand, "He dreamed too loud." A silence follows that. Then the priest's voice again, barely audible. The gods don't always speak in light. You nod, not fully understanding, but also kind of understanding. Because for every blue lotus bloom and honeyed dream temple, there was this, the dark corridor, the scrolls too damaged to finish reading, the bowl for sealing visions back inside. You pass one final scroll, its label simply reads, "What was never written down." And you leave it alone. A quiet joke helps you breathe again. Note to self, next time, take half a dose. You step out of the chamber, feeling like you're walking back into your body, inch by inch. The sunlight from a nearby window cuts across your face like a sword, and for a moment, the warmth feels like a rescue. You exhale slowly, and keep walking. Because not all Egyptian highs were divine, some were warnings. You blink into the sunlight again, this time stepping out of stone and shadow into a stretch of wild riverbank where temple boundaries blur into reeds, soil, and open sky. The Nile breathes here. It glimmers with light, drifting slowly like the spine of a sleeping serpent, and along its edges, ordinary people. Not priests, not scribes, not those wrapped in sacred linen or painted with gold dust. Just farmers, fishers, masons. Their rituals aren't etched into papyrus or sealed in tombs. But make no mistake, they trip too. The hallucinations of the Nile belong to them. You sit on a sloped embankment beside a crumbling stone dock. Nearby, a boy dips a bundle of leaves into muddy water, shakes off the excess, and chews them slowly. His older sister follows suit, then closes her eyes. Their grandmother, wrinkled, barefoot, missing 2 fingers, mutters something into the river and spits. This isn't for show. This is medicine. This is vision. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian peasants had their own class of healers and herbalists. They lacked temples, scrolls, and priests, but they knew the land. Many used wild plants like sycamore fig, fenugreek, and fermented fruits. Some of these ingredients, especially when overripe or mildly spoiled, developed alcoholic or psychoactive effects. You watch the grandmother now as she hums, eyes half-lidded, rocking gently. She holds a woven bowl filled with fermented dates, crushed with water and sweetened with wild honey. The drink fizzes gently in the sun. You know better by now. This isn't lemonade. She passes the bowl to you. You take a cautious sip. It's sweet, sour, and full of something that zips straight to your temples. You feel your pulse in your fingertips almost instantly. You blink again. And the Nile changes, not in a Hollywood woe kind of way, more like a shimmer. The water turns greener. Frogs seem louder. Light bounces in slow motion. There's a heron, maybe, Or is it a god watching you through a bird's body? A joke trickles in. When your boat ride turns into a spiritual awakening and the oars start singing. The grandmother laughs at nothing in particular. The children giggle at something you can't see. Their world is thinner than yours. Less distance between real and realer. A fringe tidbit. Some scholars suggest that Nile marshes, especially near Fayoum and Elephantine, were home to psychoactive fungi and fermented algae blooms, not deadly, but disorienting. When mixed with heat, fasting, or illness, these natural byproducts could produce auditory or visual hallucinations. And let's be honest, if you worked 14 hours stacking mud bricks in the sun, maybe seeing your dead uncle riding a crocodile wasn't so much a breakdown as a blessing. You lie back in the reeds, the warm breeze rolling over your skin, and you begin to hear singing. Low, rhythmic, a song passed down through calloused hands and lost names. No script, no translation, just the pulse of life and the need to touch the unseen. Historians still argue whether commoners believed in the same kind of soul structure as elites, Ka, Ba, Ach, etc. But we know this: they feared ghosts. They left bread and beer for the dead. They spoke to river spirits. They dreamed big dreams. And sometimes they went a little too far. Another peasant, tall, sunburned, a fisherman by the look of him, sits beside you with a jug and a grin. He hands it over. You drink. It tastes of fermented fig, papyrus root, and something bitter. He taps the side of his head and says, "Helps with the talking voices." You're not sure if he means banishing them or inviting them. Later, you see him standing waist-deep in the water, eyes closed, arms spread. His lips move rapidly, as if bargaining. A minute later, he throws a handful of dried flowers into the current and walks away as if nothing happened. No ceremony. Just life. A mainstream fact. Folk magic in ancient Egypt was often tied directly to the landscape. Villagers used mud charms, river stones, and herbs that only grew in places where crocodiles had once sunbathed, and no one saw that as strange. To them, the gods weren't trapped in temples. They were in the frogs, in the water lilies, in the way the current curved around a rock. They didn't need priests. They needed attention. The drink in your stomach bubbles gently, and suddenly the reeds sway in waves, not wind. You see shapes in the patterns, human, animal, hybrid. You blink and they're gone. Or maybe not. A child runs past you, laughing. She's covered in mud and dragging a reed doll behind her. She stops, points at the water, and whispers. He says the sky is different under there. You're not sure who she means, but you believe her. You glance back at the fisherman. He's tying small feathers into a net. Maybe it's just for fish. Maybe not. A soft joke rises. Meanwhile, somewhere in Memphis, a high priest is mixing powdered gold and saying, "Amateurs." But you get it now. The commoners didn't need gold masks or stone halls. They had dreams. They had fungi, honey wine, and river whispers. They had the same sky, the same moon, and maybe even better access to gods who didn't require permission to speak. You stand slowly, your head light, your breath easy, and in the distance, the river seems to wink. You leave the banks with flower petals in your hair, mud on your feet, and something bigger than memory sitting quietly in your lungs. Because not all visionaries wore linen. Some just chewed the wrong leaf on the right day and saw the world bloom open. You move slowly now. Not from fatigue exactly, but from the weight of everything you've seen, felt, breathed, drunk. The temple looms behind you, the river murmurs beside you, and ahead, just past a grove of sycamores, is a structure both familiar and strange. A tomb. You've seen temples built to glorify the gods. You've seen incense chambers, trance beds, medicine cabinets of the divine. But this is the end, and maybe the beginning. Because here, in this final chamber of the living, the dead are sent off in a style that's just say would put most modern funerals to shame. You step inside the tomb just as the preparations begin. The air smells thick with myrrh, cedar oil, and hot stone. There's a stillness here, ritual stillness, like the whole world is holding its breath for one last, sacred moment. In the center of the room lies a royal figure, not a pharaoh perhaps, but a noble. Draped in linen, painted with ochre and gold leaf. His face is serene, but his mouth is slightly open, as if still whispering something no one else can hear. A mainstream historical fact: Egyptian funerary rituals were elaborate, multi-day affairs designed to transform the dead, not just bury them. The goal wasn't rest, it was rebirth. The soul had to journey through the duat, the underworld, facing judgment and monsters and mirrors of the self. And to do that properly, you needed help. And by help, we mean drugs. A priest approaches with a bowl of mandrake wine, which he carefully pours over the deceased's feet. Another uncorks a small vial of oil, likely a blend of henna, blue lotus, and calamus, and rubs it along the temples, chest, and tongue. The words they whisper aren't for you. They're for the gods, and the one about to meet them. You notice a faint smile on the embalmer's face as he opens a folded pouch and places something into the dead man's mouth. It's a lotus petal soaked in honey and crushed poppy. A final offering, a final high. Because the journey through the afterlife? It's intense, and no one wants to make it sober. A fringe tidbit. Some Egyptologists believe the ingredients in these mouth-opening rituals weren't symbolic alone. They were intended to activate the soul's consciousness, to give the deceased one last push through the veil. Like lighting a spiritual rocket. And it wasn't just the dead being treated here. The mourners kneel in circles around the tomb, each passed a cup of infused wine, some with myrrh, others with cannabis oil, depending on rank and relationship. Not enough to render them senseless, just enough to see clearly. One woman sips, breathes, and begins to speak in her brother's voice. Another hums a lullaby the deceased loved in life. The third just laughs, long and gently, tears on her face. Historians still argue whether these funerary highs were real or invented in hindsight. But so many tomb inscriptions describe encounters during funerals, dreams, apparitions, sudden insights. Were they poetic license? Maybe. But right now, you believe them. You approach the edge of the tomb. A priest hands you a sliver of frankincense, tells you to burn it and speak a single word, a wish, so the deceased might carry it to the next world. You kneel, light the resin, and whisper. A quiet joke circles in your mind. Please deliver this message to the gods. Also, tell my cat I said hi. You rise. The final rites begin. The body is lowered into the sarcophagus. A harp plays softly in the background, not mournful, just accepting. Two priests sprinkle petals across the linen. One priestess draws the symbol for the heart, as I be, over the chest. Not for love, for truth. A mainstream fact. The heart was the center of the soul in Egyptian belief. During judgment, it would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at. Truth, order, balance. If it was heavier, you were fed to Amet, the devourer. If it was lighter, you passed into eternity. But here's something less known. Some funerary rites included guided visions, the priests and close family entering ritual states through wine, herbs, even mild narcotics to meet the deceased halfway. Not to say goodbye, but to walk beside them. For just a moment longer, you feel it now. That flicker, that sense of someone walking past you, not a shadow, not a sound, just a presence. And then it's gone. The tomb is sealed, and you step out into the light. The air smells like baked earth and jasmine. Someone presses a cold drink into your hand, a final gesture from a living world to a departed soul. It tastes of fig, pomegranate, and the faint bitterness of goodbye. And as you sip it, watching the sun lower behind the hills, you realize this was never about getting high. It was always about getting closer. To the gods, to the ancestors, to the breath between life and death, to the stories that don't end when the scrolls stop. Because even now, as you walk back through golden sand, beneath a sky that knows every name, there's something different in your step. You're not just alive, you're awake. Now you feel it settling, the sand soft beneath your feet. The Nile humming somewhere out of sight. The temples quiet at last. The oils washed from your skin. The smoke faded from your lungs. And everything you've seen, blue lotus, snake gods, dream beds, spells whispered into wine, swirls gently behind your eyes like sediment in still water. You're coming down now. The edges of things are rounding. Your heartbeat is slower. The colors are no longer vibrating, but they're still warm, still here. You've wandered through palaces of the mind and spirit tonight, followed incense trails into the unknown, and let ancient hands guide you across thresholds few ever notice. You've seen how high the Egyptians really got, not just with herbs and potions, but with faith, precision, imagination, and fear. How they made chemicals divine, turned dreams into doorways, and never separated mystery from medicine. And as you lie back now, maybe in bed, maybe in your own little sacred corner, know this: you're not far from them. They saw the world as layered, glowing, trembling with signals. They sought connection in everything. You just did the same. So breathe deeply. Let your own temple settle into stillness. And as your thoughts grow quieter, maybe there's one more image, soft and strange, rising like smoke in the dark behind your eyes. A field of blue lotuses opening under moonlight. A cat-faced goddess smiling with a wine cup in her hand. And your own reflection in a river that knows your name. Sleep well, traveler. You've returned.